Will Foxtel's latest anti-piracy plan work?
And is mobile data finally becoming affordable? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm here with a man who describes himself as like Uber, but for drinking bourbon, Adam Turner. Adam, what's new in tech?
Telstra has backed down on some of the more painful changes to its international roaming charges, scrapping the proposal to increase the data excess fees on travel passes from 3 cents to 10 cents per megabyte. Customers will still be slugged with a price hike, with travellers to Indonesia and Thailand the hardest hit, as the price of travel passes will double to these countries under the new plans.
Facebook's founder Mark Zuckerberg has stated that he intends to give away 99% of his Facebook shares to charity over the course of his life. The donation, which will be managed by a limited liability company, will be worth something in the region of $45 billion based on current Facebook share valuations.
The ABC has jumped on the live streaming bandwagon, with ABC One now available to watch via iView on roughly a 30-second delay. The service chews through 200 to 300 megabytes per hour and is available through desktop browsers and mobile iView apps.
Further leaked documents have cast yet more doubt on the faster, cheaper, better mantra of the mixed technology model NBN. Another contingency plan document leaked suggests that instead of an average cost of $2,600 per copper node, itself up from an original planned $600 per copper node, the terrible state of the copper network acquired from Telstra may cost up to $26,000 per node to remediate.
So Alex, are you going to throw away 99% of your family shares to, help out future generations?
Well, 99% of my family shares is, sadly for me, sadly for future generations, if you're listening to this in 100 years hence, isn't going to be worth a whole lot of money. But obviously Mark Zuckerberg's made a lot of publicity for himself by stating that that's actually what he's going to do, and he's the latest in a long line of these mega rich tech types to state this. I mean, Bill Gates famously, of course, set up the Gates Foundation, which manages his money towards charitable ends, and Zuckerberg's doing
fighting malaria and stuff like that. I mean, that's a pretty noble cause. I mean,
it is.
That's like Princess Bride kind of noble cause,
I'm really torn by this, because there is part of me that says, yeah, look, there is a greater good being served here. There are charitable goods being served here. At the same time, I'm a little bit torn because of the way it's being done. In Zuckerberg's case, for example, he's not actually setting up a charitable foundation. He's setting up a limited liability company to do this. And that affords him some leeway as to how the money's spent. Not just in terms of saying, right, well, I think malaria is more important than cancer or AIDS research or poverty or any of a number of really good causes, but also it means he can do things like lobby in the US for certain causes that he thinks are important. Now, on the one hand, hey, it's his money. He can spend it as he likes. On the other hand, it means that certain things get prioritised over certain other things to a very large capital fund, and also a very large capital fund. And I've seen this argument, and I'm not an expert on US tax law, but I've seen the argument, because of the way this is set up, and I think because of the way some of Gates' stuff is set up as well, it's tax deductible for him. And again, fair play.
How wonderful.
This is how the rules work. But yes. What this means, of course, is that
the man's never going to pay tax for the rest of his life.
Well, there's that. But also, some 30-odd% of that $45 billion is actually met by the US taxpayer, but Zuckerberg's the one who gets to say where it goes. So suddenly there's billions of dollars of taxpayer money that he's kind of assumed control of. And I'm a little cautious on this, because obviously individual people will have individual ideas on what they think is a greater social good than others. And especially in the case of Zuckerberg, where he set up this limited liability corporation, he's got a bit more flexibility in kind of saying, right, well, this is what we're going to do with it. A charity operates under slightly different rules. And it's almost a very Victorian way of thinking. If you look at the huge Victorian capitalists, they did very, very similar things. They set up charitable foundations that did very, very good work, that served a greater good, but also served their own personal, political, social viewpoints above anything else. And I'm a
maybe
little
realistically that's the best we can hope for, is that they're happy to help everyone. It's a bit like the plot of Stark. They're happy to help everyone else as long as there's something in it for them. And if that's better than, spending the whole, 45 billion on hookers and blackjack, then maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Unless you're in the hooker and blackjack industry, I think I probably agree. So, Adam, Foxtel's having another tilt at blocking pirate sites in Australia. Do you reckon they've got a chance?
Yeah, sure, they've got a chance to block them. Will it achieve anything? No.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
And that's been the story from the beginning. I mean, the legislation to do this has been in place since the middle of the year, but Foxtel are lining up early 2016, they're talking about, to be the first ones to actually hand over a list to the courts and say, we don't like these websites. I'd like to never see them again, please. It's not going to really achieve anything. I mean, for starters, serious pirates don't even use open things like BitTorrent, and try and find me a casual pirate who uses BitTorrent who hasn't heard of a VPN. I mean, I regularly check to see if my favorite piracy websites are still there, and I have to double check that I haven't forgotten to switch off my VPN. It's going to do is drive the problem underground, and they'll turn around in a year's time and say, hey, look, it must have worked, we haven't caught anybody.
See, I mean, I guess I check if pirate sites are there, but I do so these days almost out of a professional interest, because this is stuff that you and I write about. And look, I'm not going to, get up on a white horse and say that I am completely, innocent in this regard. I guess I have watched the odd bit of pirated material, but these days I'm considerably less inclined to even bother, because the vast majority of content, has started to flow into Australia, I think, at appreciably good rates, although this hasn't seemed to actually stem the flow of piracy. I noticed with interest that the recent Netflix Jessica Jones series ended up on a bunch of piracy sites for people to grab, and that to me just kind of said, well, okay, this is very much the we just want it for free crowd, because I couldn't really see a really good argument for saying that was overpriced.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be a small percentage of people who steal stuff, but I've noticed a similar thing. A friend of mine's one of the biggest pirates I know, doesn't use things like BitTorrent, way beyond that. He was talking to me the other day about how he's watching stuff on Netflix and Stan. And now, this is the guy who doesn't buy anything. Yet he's still paying for these. And why? Because of the convenience. Because he's done the maths, whether or not he's done it consciously, and gone for $10 a month, I think this is worth it. And that kind of convenience, addressing the reasons why people piracy, will sort out 90% of the problem. But as you say, there's always going to be a few people who, on principle, as odd as that sounds, will never pay for anything. But if I was,
well, I think the principle is that they're cheapskates.
Yeah, well, now some of them have this argument that information should be free, and apparently that applies to content as well.
Yeah, I think at this stage, if you are pirating mass content, it's because you're a cheapskate.
Or the other thing is that you may be pirating stuff that's actually there for free anyway. A lot of people, I think, would be pirating stuff that's on free-to-air television. Why? Because they don't want to jump through the hoops of Channel 9 to try and see The Big Bang Theory when 9 happens to put it on, in the resolution 9 happens to show, with all the rubbish they plaster over the top of it and run it early and run it late. And
my brain wants to say, and this is in no way meant to be an advertisement, but that's on Presto. Easy to stream.
Oh, no, but it's only been on Presto a couple of days, though.
True. Or just buy a PVR.
Oh, well, but no, a PVR won't even save you, because they're such jerks when it comes to the EPG and starting stuff on time that you'd be lucky even. I did a test for the last couple of years.
There is also a small part of my brain that says, if you're being saved from watching The Big Bang Theory, that's probably a good thing, but...
Oh, they're fighting words.
See, I prefer comedy.
Let's say, ooh, this is going to get ugly. Let's take it out to the car park.
This is the two of us. It was always ugly.
But like Lost is a good example. All right, every season Lost would come on. I'd say, right, I'll do the right thing. I'll record it with my TiVo, which is one of the more reliable recorders, and without fail, my TiVo would miss at least one episode of Lost every season, which I would have to source from other means, because I can't even remember if that was 9, but my point is
they'd stuff around with the scheduling and you'd miss
so badly. Yeah, so I would think there'd be some people, even I might theoretically be talking about myself, who if they were leaning on things like BitTorrent sites, it'd be they're not taking something that they would otherwise have had to pay for other than sitting through the ads. They're doing it for their convenience, because the networks have just driven people away with decades of abuse.
Okay, so slight devil's advocate here because I'm not a huge fan of the streaming solutions that the free-to-air commercial channels use.
That's the other thing, and they're not. The resolution's not really good enough.
Does the presence of these kind of catch-up things though not cover for a lot of that? I mean, given they're now, as we've discussed before, doing a lot more straight live streaming to the internet, but also then making programs available by catch-up, doesn't that solve for that problem?
Not really. The picture quality on catch-up TV tends to be very hit and miss, particularly with the commercial networks. The ABC and SBS are pretty good. They don't have all the shows that you want, and you still. And this gets to. I admit that part of it is you still got to sit through their ads and you can't skip it. If that alone was the only thing, and in other ways it was just as good, then yes, sometimes that would stand up. But
as it said, I'm not a big fan of the commercial free-to-air streaming solutions, and the ads is part of it. Not so much from the unskippability, but because every single time I've tried to use them, whatever ad server they're using seems to be about 3 or 4 times slower than the actual program. So you'll sit there watching a 30-second ad for 4 minutes because it comes and goes, and you really hate the product.
This is the problem, particularly with HBB TV. In Australia, the model that we use is stuffed. It's different to what we do overseas. We're inserting the ads on the client, and we're doing it using a technology a different way that they do it in other countries, and it's a mess. I've been criticizing it from the beginning, so have other people. Watching the HBB TV, those catch-up services transition from a show to an ad and then back again is a nightmare. What they're doing in New Zealand and the technology they're working on now here is to be able to insert the ads on the server side. So all of that mucking around is done somewhere else, not in your lounge room.
So you just get the one stream of the one program which has the ads pre-inserted.
Yes. If they move to that model, that should clean a lot of that up. Because yes, when I first started testing HBB TV, it was really a crapshoot as to whether or not when you came back from the ad break, it would actually go back to the show. So, Alex, we're seeing some much better mobile data deals from a lot of the telcos here. Is this a major permanent shift, or is this just a bit of a blip, what's happening here?
Look, it's a bit hard to say that it's an absolute permanent shift, although the tendency for all of these things is that once customers get used to a certain level of service at a certain level of price, it's very hard to get them to shift back or to accept that, oh no, these are suddenly going to cost an awful lot more. And what's brought this about? Telstra announced a deal, limited time, online only, but for $40, you'd get 7 gig of data on their network. Now, Telstra historically sells itself as a premium network. I think there's a reasonable argument for that, and certainly if you're regional, they can often be your only choice, although obviously that brings in some monopoly issues as well.
Yeah.
But they've never really been hugely cheap, affordable, incredibly competitive in this space. Now, what's happened, though, is that, especially over the course of this year, many, many more carriers, Telstra's been one of the few that's really held on to the model, at least in the entry level, have shifted to making things like calls and texts just part of unlimited packages. You can just have as many as you want. You can leave your phone running and send millions of texts. They don't care. That's all part of your package. So what everyone is differentiating on is data. Data is that new battlefield. And what's happening is that the packages are getting more and more attractive. The cost of mobile data, while still way above that of fixed line, is going down. So Telstra's got this deal, $40, gets you 7 gig on Telstra. Optus came out and said, right, well, fine, we'll do a 12-month, it's a 12-month contract, not month to month, but we'll do a 12-month SIM-only contract, $40 for 10 gig. I'm yet to see
I think I'd rather the 7 gig on Telstra's network than the 10 gig on Optus's network, but kind of depends on where you live.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, and your network experience very much depends on where you live. It certainly used to be the case that I think in almost every instance I'd say, look, go with Telstra if you can afford them. But for a lot of people, actually, Optus's network has improved. Even Vodafone's network has improved. And those are the 3 major networks. Even if you go through a virtual provider, those are the 3 major networks you're playing. Yeah, Vodafone only really had up to go. But we're seeing a lot more of this competition. I mean, just today, Virgin Mobile announced a deal with Presto, of all people, whereby if you had a Presto account and you streamed Presto on your mobile at least once in a given month, and you signed up with them, obviously, and you're on a postpaid contract, they'll give you 2 gig of extra data free to use that month. Now, 2 gig is not to be sneezed at the same time, 2 gig in mobile video streaming terms is only maybe an hour or two of actual watching. It's not a huge quantity, but it's still there. And they've got a similar, slightly weird deal with the local music streaming mob, Gavera, that does a similar kind of thing with less data. What's surprising, though, is from the Presto side of things, they put out a release a little while ago which suggested that they're actually seeing a genuine actual spike in people watching streaming video via Presto on their mobiles. Now,
so I don't understand this. Is this just because they don't have home internet access, or they're watching it on the train? Who are these crazy people?
They are apparently watching it on the train. Like the times that they seem to see these spikes coincide with major in-transit to and from work time. So these are people watching sitcom episodes, watching movies on the train on the way back and forth.
Great shows like The Big Bang Theory.
Well, shows that make me want to grate my face off like The Big Bang Theory, yes, absolutely. We're in agreement at last. But no, there seems to be this rise of people doing this. Now, I think you've got to be incredibly careful, because video is one of those things where you can blow out your data so fast it'd make your head spin, especially if you happen to be in an area where your 4G signal's good and your video provider goes, oh, you've got a really nice fast connection. Right, well, I'll up you to 1080p.
That's particularly where Netflix is dangerous. Yes, because Netflix, the faster your internet gets, the more bandwidth they just keep throwing the picture quality at you, which is great unless you're counting your gigs.
Yeah, and when you're on a mobile screen where the difference between that 720p or 1080p might not even be all that perceptible to you, it's, you can really chew through the data. It can be really quite dangerous, but people are doing this. And I think, again, once those usage patterns are set in people's minds, once that's what they do, it actually does get harder for those networks to jack up the prices massively. Yes, there's a certain amount of get them hooked and then you've got a customer for life. Drug analogies run wild, which is why, for example, Vodafone on a lot of its contracts offers that deal where you get free weekends or free month or whatever of use as much data as you like, and then we start charging you for it. It's to get you hooked. At the same time, you establish these usage patterns, you establish these price points, and it is hard to go back. So while these are currently seasonal deals, and it will be really interesting to see how competitive, how far they push that. Because currently, without really hyperextending the value of a deal, the top tier deals in Australia right now run to about a top of about 20 gig of data per month. And that's their expectation of the max that, your top tier users are going to be using. As soon as you introduce video streaming, that can blow through the roof.
That's gone real quick.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see whether or not in 12 months' time, those deals, which currently run about 140 to 200, depends on your carrier, per month for that level of data, it'll be fascinating to see whether or not they're suddenly offering 50 or 100 gig, which are, frankly, are data rates that just a couple of years ago you would have thought, well, nobody's going to use that much. But if you give people data, they will use it.
They use it, yeah. I've never understood. I mean, as a man who's worked from home for 10 years, I don't do the daily commute anymore. But and when I did, I had to be very careful with my data, because we were talking about how many meg you could use, not how many gig you could use. Seriously, shouldn't these people just be BitTorrenting stuff at home and then copying across to their phones before they leave in the morning? Isn't that the sensible thing to do?
Well, from a strictly legal point of view, what they should be doing under Australian copyright law is time-shifting their existing VHS content, because that's analog, and you're allowed to make a digital copy of that and watching that on their phones. The other thing, actually, that somewhat surprises me, because I'm someone who, like yourself, freelance for a number of years, I now have an office job. What surprises me... Yeah, I know,
you bailed on me and got a job. I'm still devastated about that.
You'll get over it in time, I'm sure. But what surprised me about that is and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, the morning commute in data terms can be a real bun fight. I have periods where I have excellent data connectivity on my run into work, and I catch a train. But there are also periods where it's like, there are too many people on phones on this train, and I want most of them to leave now so I can get my data back.
Everybody and I don't get how next people station, are streaming trying video. To watch Jessica Jones.
Yeah, I don't get how people are watching video in those circumstances, although maybe it's because just one or two of them are watching video and everyone else on the train has to suffer. Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold. If you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page.
Thanks for joining us, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button.